When people ask me, what's your religion? I used to say, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I was one of those guys. I'm a servant of God. And if you're seeking to draw closer to God, this is the channel for you. Every 2 weeks, I'll be dropping a personal story and explaining how that story brought me closer to God. So there was a period of my life where I was into the spiritual community, exploring I was exploring different spiritual practices. Some of those practices included exploring with different crystals, seeing what crystals may be for me. Some of those practices included going to fortune tellers and trying to understand what my future could possibly be like. And I read all types of spiritual books. I read books like The Secret. I read books like The Untethered Soul. And I was also really deep into meditation and doing all types of spiritual practices or new age spirituality. I think that's what some of these stuff will be considered under. And honestly, I was doing all those things because I was seeking answers to the deepest questions in life, pretty much trying to understand what my purpose is in this world and just get more clarity about my life and how I can be a better person overall. And then at the time I would even do psychedelics. And when I was doing psychedelics, I would go into it with the intention of again seeking clarity. I wasn't doing shrooms with like, oh, like, let's party, bro, and like, oh, let's go, let's turn up. Like, I'm generally trying to answer questions about who's Ike, what am I here for? And essentially, I'm seeking clarity. And I believe mushrooms are a tool to do that. But ultimately, if I'm being honest with myself, I was seeking God, but I just had no idea. I didn't know I was seeking God. But with all those books I was reading, the answers I was looking for, the psychedelic introspection I was doing, all those things that I was doing, I was seeking God, honestly. I just didn't know it at the time. And so essentially, the thing that helped transform my mind and evolved my way of thinking was actually a conversation I had on the phone with one of my good Christian friends. And, we were just catching up, talking. He's a good friend from college. And to this day, we stay in touch. And we were just talking about our beliefs, and he was talking about his belief in God. And again, I said the same thing. Hey, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And he's like a very direct guy. He's like, yo, bro, what does that mean? And if I'm being honest, I couldn't really explain what that meant, honestly. And then he followed up his question with, hey, do you know to be Christian is to be spiritual? And I know that's such a simple statement, but for me, it hit hard because I've always disconnected spirituality with Christianity. And that made me feel like I couldn't be both. But when he said that, something hit in my head and it started the exploration of getting back into Christian practices for me. So shout out to my friend. He had a powerful influence on me and he may not even have known. So upon doing that, I've gone back to church. I got baptized and I recommitted my life to Christ. And I've experienced a lot of his goodness and grace. The two biggest issues that I've personally experienced with the new age spirituality or the trends of this new age spirituality are these two things. The first is there's a tremendous lack of clarity when it comes to defining yourself as spiritual. And when someone asks, well, what does it mean to be spiritual? I couldn't give you that answer. I couldn't tell you what that meant in regards to my beliefs about marriage, what that meant in regards to my beliefs about the world and treating other people, how I view other people. I couldn't really define what it meant to be spiritual. And there was a huge lack of clarity. And I always felt that whenever people asked me about that, and even though I read so many books about it, I still could not just simply tell you what spirituality is about without necessarily being too vague or confusing or clear on my thoughts. The second biggest issue, and I think this is an issue that often doesn't get talked about enough is when you speak about being spiritual and acting in those type of ways, a lot of times it's rooted in ego. So what those spiritual practices would teach is that you can do everything and that you have the power. I have the power to change the course of my life. I have the power to be happy, and I have the power to do anything I could possibly want to do. You're essentially telling yourself that I have the power, and I'm all for having self belief in yourself. I love confident people who go after what they believe in and have goals for themselves. But the ironic thing is, when you're operating under that I can do anything, you're rooted in ego. It's like so, and that's something I've always had a problem with. One of my goals was I'm going to be a millionaire, and I would always tell myself I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire, and I never really had a good reason for being a millionaire, other than oh man, that just sounds really cool, and the thought of having a lot of money sounds nice. Little did I know I was really operating under ego. I've never mentioned I wanted to be a millionaire for a defined set of purpose with the intentions of helping a lot of people. It was just like, hey, I want to be a millionaire. And that was rooted in a lot of ego that always created some dissonance in me. One of the biggest changes I've experienced since following Christ and living more of a Christian lifestyle is the dissolution of my ego, essentially, because the transition from being quote unquote spiritual towards being Christian was actually seamless, because the biggest thing I've done was essentially, instead of giving myself all the glory, hey, I'm a pharmacist. I graduated from pharmacist. I healed myself from all my pain. I give it up to God. God is the reason why I'm here today. God is the reason why I'm experiencing so much success. God is the reason why I'm able to speak to y'all and explain this story to y'all, and in doing that, every time I speak about God and the goodness he's done for me, I'm no longer making this about me, and there's less of an ego towards it. And for me, it's always felt a lot more natural and better to do that. And there's a greater sense of purpose that comes from giving glory to God instead of just making everything about me, 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 me. So that's one of the biggest changes I've experienced since becoming a newborn, strong Christian. And yeah, that's it. I hope y'all find this video helpful. If there's any topics or anything you would like to see on this channel, please let me know. I'm really here to serve to the best of my abilities. And remember, if God is for us, who can be against us?